A prince walks onto a talk show expecting deference, but finds himself face to face with someone who refuses to bow. In just 39 seconds of one comment, Prince Harry's appearance on The View went from cordial conversation to complete catastrophe, ending in the most shocking exit in daytime television history. The morning started like any other episode. The studio audience buzzed with anticipation as they waited for the royal guest to make his entrance. Whoopi Goldberg sat at the table, reviewing her notes with the calm professionalism that had made her a beloved fixture of American television for decades. Her co-hosts chatted among themselves, but Whoopi remained focused, preparing for what was supposed to be a straightforward interview about Harry's latest charitable initiatives. When Prince Harry walked onto the set, the audience erupted in applause. He smiled and waved, settling into his seat with an air of casual confidence. Whoopi extended her hand for a warm handshake, welcoming him with genuine enthusiasm. "Thank you so much for being here," Whoopi said, her voice warm and inviting. "We're excited to hear about the work you've been doing." Harry leaned back in his chair, crossing his legs with a relaxed posture that seemed just a touch too comfortable. "Well, thank you for having me, though I must say I'm used to a slightly different caliber of interview." The comment hung in the air for a moment. Whoopi's smile didn't falter, but something shifted in her eyes. She had been in this business long enough to recognize a dismissive remark when she heard one. "Different caliber?" Whoopi repeated, her tone still pleasant, but with an edge of curiosity. "How so?" Harry waved his hand dismissively. "Oh, just more serious journalism. Hard-hitting questions. The kind of conversations that actually matter." The studio went quiet. Even the co-hosts exchanged uncomfortable glances. Whoopi set down her notes and gave Harry her full attention. "I see," she said slowly. "Well, we certainly ask serious questions here. We've interviewed presidents, activists, world leaders. But I'm curious what you think actually matters." Harry seemed oblivious to the tension building in the room. "Real issues, global concerns, not celebrity gossip and morning fluff pieces." Whoopi nodded thoughtfully, maintaining her composure even as the insult landed squarely on the table between them. "Fluff pieces. Interesting. So you think what we do here is fluff?" "I didn't mean it like that," Harry backtracked, but his tone suggested he meant exactly that. "I just think there's a difference between entertainment and substance." "And you've decided we're entertainment," Whoopi said. "It wasn't a question." Harry shifted in his seat, his confidence wavering for the first time. "Look, I agreed to come on because my team thought it would be good for visibility. But let's be honest about what this is." Whoopi leaned forward, her expression still composed, but her voice carrying more weight. "Why don't you tell me what this is, since you seem to have it all figured out?" "It's a talk show," Harry said, as if explaining something obvious to a child. "It's designed to make people feel good during their morning coffee. There's nothing wrong with that." "But it's not exactly the BBC, is it?" the audience murmured, sensing the conversation spiraling into dangerous territory. Whoopi's co-hosts remained silent, recognizing that their colleague was handling this with the expertise of someone who had dealt with difficult guests before. "You're right. It's not the BBC," Whoopi agreed. "It's something different. We have conversations. We listen. We engage with our audience about things that matter to them, their lives, their concerns, their experiences." Harry laughed, a sound that came across as condescending rather than amused. "With all due respect, Whoopi, I've spent my life dealing with real problems. Poverty, mental health crises, veterans struggling to reintegrate into society. That's what I focus on. That's what I'm passionate about." "With all due respect," Whoopi echoed, her voice steady. "So have I. I've used this platform to talk about every single one of those issues. I've advocated for change. I've raised awareness. I've put my money and my time where my mouth is. So I'm wondering what makes your work more real than mine?" Harry's face flushed slightly. "I didn't say that." You absolutely did, Whoopi corrected him, her tone firm, but not harsh. You walked in here, sat down at this table, and told me and my colleagues that what we do doesn't matter, that we're beneath the level of conversation you're accustomed to. I think you're twisting my words, Harry protested. I don't think I am, Whoopi replied. I think you came here expecting us to treat you like royalty, to ask soft questions, and let you promote whatever you wanted to promote. And when I suggested we'd ask real questions, you got defensive. Harry sat up straighter, his jaw tightening. I'm not defensive. I'm simply stating facts. There's a hierarchy in media, and everyone knows it. A hierarchy, Whoopi repeated. And where do you think you fall in that hierarchy? At the top, I'm guessing. I've worked with the most respected journalists in the world, Harry said, his voice rising slightly. People who actually understand the weight of the platform they have. Whoopi didn't blink. And you don't think I understand the weight of my platform? I've had this seat for years. I've talked to people from every walk of life. I've used my voice to advocate for change. I've won awards for the work I've done. But you walk in here and tell me it's fluff. Maybe if you spent less time on celebrity drama and more time on substantive issues, you'd be taken more seriously, Harry shot back. The audience gasped audibly. This wasn't just a disagreement anymore. This was a direct attack. Whoopi paused, taking a breath. When she spoke again, her voice was calm, but carried an unmistakable authority. I'm going to give you a chance to walk that back. Harry crossed his arms. Why should I? It's true. Because you're sitting at a table with women who have built careers on substance, Whoopi said. Women who have fought for their place in this industry. Women who don't need a title to command respect. And you're insulting all of us. I'm not insulting anyone, Harry insisted. I'm just being honest. No, Whoopi corrected. You're being disrespectful. There's a difference. Harry leaned forward, his expression hardening. You know what your problem is. You can't handle criticism. You're so used to everyone agreeing with you in this echo chamber that when someone tells you the truth, you can't take it. Whoopi's co-hosts started to interject, but she held up a hand, keeping her eyes locked on Harry. My problem? Let's talk about your problem. You came into this country, left your royal duties, and now you spend your time telling everyone else how they should live their lives. You lecture people about privacy while doing interview after interview. You talk about wanting a normal life while courting every camera you can find. And now you come onto my show and tell me I don't do serious work? At least I'm trying to make a difference, Harry said, his voice sharp. What are you doing besides sitting here talking? The words hit like a slap. The studio went completely silent. Even the cameras seemed to pause, as if the production crew couldn't believe what they were hearing. Whoopi stood up slowly. Her movements were deliberate, controlled. She looked down at Harry with an expression that mixed disappointment with resolve. I've been making a difference since before you were born, she said quietly, her voice carrying more power in its restraint than any shout could have. I've fought for civil rights. I've advocated for equality. I've used every ounce of my platform to lift up voices that weren't being heard. And I've done it without a title, without a palace, without expecting the world to bow down to me because of who my family is. Harry stood up as well, his face red. This is exactly the kind of treatment I left the UK to escape. This hostility. This refusal to understand. Hostility? Whoopi's voice remained steady. You came into my house and insulted me. You insulted my co-hosts. You insulted our audience. You dismissed the work we do as beneath you. And when I called you out on it, you doubled down. That's not hostility. That's accountability. Something you clearly aren't used to. I don't have to sit here and listen to this, Harry said, his voice tight with anger. You're absolutely right, Whoopi agreed. You don't. Harry stared at her, seemingly expecting her to back down or apologize. When she didn't, his expression shifted from anger to disbelief. Are you serious right now? He asked. Completely, Whoopi said. You came here as a guest. Guests show respect. You haven't done that. So I'm going to ask you to leave. You can't kick me off the show, Harry said, incredulous. I absolutely can, Whoopi replied. This is my table. This is my show. And I don't have to give a platform to someone who thinks he's too good to be here in the first place. Harry looked around at the co-hosts, perhaps expecting them to intervene on his behalf. None of them moved. They sat in solidarity with Whoopi, their expressions making it clear whose side they were on. This is outrageous, Harry said, his voice rising. Do you know who I am? I know exactly who you are, Whoopi said calmly. You're someone who's about to leave this stage. Harry's mouth opened and closed, searching for words. You'll regret this. This will be everywhere. The media will have a field day. Let them, Whoopi said with a slight shrug. I've been in the media longer than you've been alive. I can handle it. Can you? The question hung in the air. Harry seemed to realize he'd lost this battle. His face was a mixture of embarrassment and fury. He looked at Whoopi one more time, as if giving her a final chance to change her mind. She didn't move. Fine, Harry said tersely. I didn't want to be here anyway. That was obvious from the moment you sat down, Whoopi replied. Harry turned sharply and walked toward the exit. The studio audience remained silent, stunned by what they'd just witnessed. As he reached the edge of the stage, he paused and turned back. You know what? You're just like all the rest. You can't handle someone who actually stands for something. Whoopi didn't rise to the bait. She simply looked at him with an expression that somehow managed to be both kind and devastating. Harry, I've stood for more than you can possibly imagine, and I've done it without throwing tantrums when people don't treat me like I'm special. That's the difference between us. Harry's jaw clenched. For a moment, it looked like he might say something else, but instead, he turned and walked off the stage. The sound of his footsteps echoed through the silent studio until finally, a door slammed somewhere backstage. The audience erupted, not in applause, but in shocked conversation. People turned to each other, processing what they'd just seen. The cameras stayed on Whoopi, who remained standing at the table, composed and dignified. She looked directly into the camera and took a breath. Well, she said, her tone lighter but still serious. That was something. One of her co-hosts finally spoke up. Whoopi, are you okay? Whoopi sat back down, smoothing her jacket. I'm fine, but I want to be clear about something. She looked into the camera again, speaking directly to the viewers at home. We welcome all kinds of guests on this show. We have conversations with people we agree with and people we don't. We ask tough questions. We have debates. But what we don't do is allow anyone, regardless of their title or their background, to come here and disrespect the work we do or the people who watch this show. She paused, letting the words sink in. You all tune in every day because you want real conversation. You want honesty. You want substance. And that's what we give you. Not fluff. Not entertainment for entertainment's sake. Real talk about real issues. And if someone can't see that, if someone thinks they're too important to engage with us on those terms, then they don't belong at this table. The audience began to clap, slowly at first, then building to a standing ovation. Whoopi allowed herself a small smile, acknowledging their support with a gracious nod. We're going to take a quick break, she continued, and when we come back, we're going to talk about something that actually matters. We're going to talk about the people doing real work in their communities without cameras following them around. Stay with us. As the show cut to commercial, Whoopi sat back in her chair. Her co-hosts reached over to squeeze her hand, offering silent support. She squeezed back, grateful for their solidarity, but also clear-eyed about what had just happened. The commercial break felt longer than usual. Backstage, producers scrambled to adjust the rest of the show's schedule. What was supposed to be a 30-minute interview had ended in less than 10 minutes of explosive confrontation. They needed to fill the time, But more importantly, they needed to manage the fallout that was surely coming. But Whoopi wasn't worried about the fallout. She'd said what needed to be said. She'd stood up for herself, her colleagues, and her audience. And she'd done it without losing her composure or stooping to the level of personal attacks. When the show came back from commercial, Whoopi pivoted seamlessly to the next segment. She highlighted a teacher from Detroit who had started a community garden program that was feeding hundreds of families. She talked to an advocate working to reform the criminal justice system. She gave platform to people whose work was making a tangible difference in the world, people who didn't need titles or royal connections to matter. And through it all, she maintained the professionalism and grace that had made her a fixture of daytime television. She proved, without saying it explicitly, that her work did matter, that this platform did serve a purpose, that substance and accessibility weren't mutually exclusive. The studio audience, still buzzing from the earlier confrontation, gave her their full attention. They laughed at the right moments. They applauded the guests who came on to share their stories. And they supported Whoopi with an energy that felt protective, almost defiant. As the show drew to a close, Whoopi addressed the camera one final time. Thank you for being here today. Thank you for watching. Thank you for engaging with the conversations we have. And thank you for understanding that respect goes both ways. We'll see you tomorrow. The credits rolled, but the impact of what had happened would extend far beyond the closing music. The confrontation between Whoopi and Harry had laid bare something fundamental about celebrity, privilege, and respect. It had shown that titles don't automatically command deference, especially when the person holding that title shows none themselves. Whoopi had drawn a line. She'd made it clear that her table, her show, her platform demanded mutual respect, and she'd been willing to enforce that boundary, even when it meant removing a prince from her presence. So as the studio lights dimmed and the audience filed out, still talking animatedly about what they'd witnessed, Whoopi gathered her things. Her co-hosts clustered around her, offering words of support and admiration. "That took courage," one of them said. Whoopi shook her head slightly. "It took boundaries. Everyone deserves to be treated with respect. That includes us." And with that simple statement, she captured the essence of what had happened. This wasn't about celebrity drama or manufactured controversy. It was about standing up for yourself and your work when someone tries to diminish it. It was about refusing to accept disrespect, no matter who it comes from. The confrontation had started with Harry's dismissive comments about the show's caliber. It had escalated through his continued insistence that his work, his platform, his priorities were somehow more legitimate than those of the women sitting across from him. And it had ended with Whoopi calmly but firmly showing him the door. There were no dramatic music cues, no theatrical gestures, just a woman who knew her worth and wasn't afraid to defend it. Just a host who understood that her responsibility was to her audience, her colleagues, and her own integrity, not to making a difficult guest feel comfortable in his disrespect. What made the moment so powerful wasn't the conflict itself, but the way Whoopi handled it. She didn't shout. She didn't insult. She didn't stoop to personal attacks. She simply stood firm in her truth and refused to be moved. She had given Harry multiple opportunities to course correct. She'd pointed out his disrespect. She'd explained the value of her work. She'd offered him chances to acknowledge his misstep. And when he doubled down instead, when he chose to escalate rather than reflect, she made the decision that needed to be made. The audience's reaction spoke volumes. They didn't see Whoopi as harsh or unreasonable. They saw her as someone defending herself and the work she loved. They saw her as someone unwilling to let privilege and entitlement override basic decency. In a media landscape often criticized for giving platforms to people who don't deserve them, Whoopi had done something radical. She had taken that platform away. She had said, clearly and definitively, that access to her show was a privilege, not a right. And that privilege could be revoked when it was abused. The silence that had fallen over the studio when Harry made his most cutting remarks, the collective gasp from the audience, the shocked faces of the co-hosts, all of it testified to the weight of his words. He hadn't just criticized the show. He'd dismissed the legitimacy of work done by women in media. He'd suggested that their platform was less important, less serious, less worthy of respect than the ones he preferred. And Whoopi had called him on it. Not with matching insults or escalating anger, but with calm clarity. She'd named what was happening. She'd identified the disrespect, and she'd refused to tolerate it. When Harry had played his final